Fear and greed. This is the second in our two-part series, and today it's all about greed. I'm Jason Schmidt, and this is the Weekly Mail. When we addressed fear in our last video, it was within the context of how a changing market environment can create conditions under which people may do things they otherwise would not, out of fear of losing something or not necessarily wanting something to happen. Though the nuance can sometimes be lost in the distinction between the two, greed is an entirely different animal. It is the underlying motivation of the actor that distinguishes the two. It is the willingness to pursue with the intent to gain, knowingly putting others in potential harm. But before we go any further, please remember to like and subscribe to stay up to date with our real estate and financial market news. I mentioned within the first video of this series that I would use examples of transactions in which we've represented buyers and encountered disclosure issues, and I have no shortage of those examples. But I've changed my mind. I've decided to tell a story from long ago, the last period of market decline, right smack in the aftermath of the 2008 financial and housing crisis. And I decided to go this route because I'm starting to see and hear from agents within our organization that there is a feeling of this sort of behavior beginning to bubble up again. What topic is this, you might ask? Well, we call it agents behaving badly. From around 2010 to 2013, traditional approaches to financing a home purchase were very challenging, if not altogether impossible in some circumstances. In the luxury space, that was even more true. At that time, our team was split between a luxury residential practice and a commercial development practice. This period was tough. We were doing deals, but they were hard. On the commercial end, the economics had to prove out very clearly, and deals were taking a very long time to get done. In the housing space, there was always some complicated mechanism that had to be introduced. From the simpler end of seller financing and loan assumptions to these multi-layered, cross-collateralized business transactions interwoven with a home purchase. But we did some fun stuff too, like X amount of dollars in cash, plus a boat and a fleet of golf carts. Yes, I'm serious. And from this period, there was one deal I will never forget. So we're representing the seller of a luxury home, and the nature of the market back then was we would list at a price because a homeowner usually had a very high basis, because they very likely purchased a home sometime between 2003 and 2008. We would set value expectations based on the market at the time, but objective number one was to recover as much of that basis as possible. Now, here we are, as it would normally go. We list at a high price, and over the subsequent year or two or three, we would incrementally be dropping the price until interest was generated. Homes in general, but specifically luxury properties, could sit on the market for a long time back then. So I think with this property, it was originally listed in the high $3 or low $4 million range, and it was on the market for quite some time. At some point, we got it below $3 million, and we started to get some interest, and offers started coming in. We finally landed on this particular buyer, and off we went in the normal course of things. It also just so happened that the buyer was paying cash, so there wasn't going to be this excessive number of creative hoops we would need to jump through. At this point, everyone is very, very happy. Now, this home was probably 20 years old at this point, so when inspections started, we anticipated there being a list of stuff that would need to be repaired or replaced. We had a very cordial and open dialogue with both the seller and the buyer's representative about addressing whatever issues that came in with the report. So there really wasn't much to worry about. It was more so the idea of triaging certain issues and addressing whatever came in. So now the report comes in, and as expected, there's a laundry list of what you might call little stuff. You know, this electrical outlet needs to be replaced, that soffit needs repair, there's a few cracked roof tiles, the AC system needs to be serviced, stuff like that. And the seller agreed to fix all of it. There was, however, one big item that we were alerted to. The second floor of this home had a balcony coming off of what was a large common area, or what you might see as an entertainment space. It was a pretty cool feature. Now, one big issue we commonly face in Florida home inspections almost always centers around water. A water leak, water intrusion, water pooling, that kind of stuff. And for us, it isn't just that we may have a water leak. We must worry about how long something has been leaking, where it is leaking, and what materials it is leaking into. Fixing the water intrusion is important for sure, but with the heat and humidity we experience here, we're also worried about the growth of mold and fungus and weird bacteria and that kind of stuff. This balcony had a series of small cracks in the flooring tiles. Over time, these cracks began to let water in, and the substructure of the balcony became totally saturated. The seller never went out onto this balcony, so when we brought this to their attention, there was a very real concern that we have a big problem to solve. And it became an all-hands-on-deck exercise. Our team, the buyer's representative, and the contractor who built the house all met on several occasions to discuss how this problem would be addressed. There were innumerable emails exchanged with communication between all parties, from "what are we going to do about this" to "it's going to cost this much to fix." It was as transparent a line of communication as you could have wanted in a situation like this. So after a period of back and forth, the buyer's rep tells us the buyer is fine with it, the balcony that is, and that they're planning on renovating portions of the home, so this is something that will need to be opened up anyway during that process. They're just excited to close, start work on the house, and really just move in. That approach and mindset are not uncommon in the luxury space. Very often there are modifications or renovations that happen after closing. Our discussions on this issue were so extensive and took place over such an extended period, the approach to everything made sense. Because of this renovation process, the collection of little issues that were needing to be addressed were put off, and that stuff was just converted into a price reduction. So it seemed like everyone was happy. The price reduction was memorialized, and the buyer's waiver of the extended inspection period they were granted to address this balcony issue was waived, and we proceeded on to closing. A week or two later, we closed. The buyer and the seller met one another, everyone had champagne, and all was right with the world. Until it wasn't. 9 or so months later, we get a letter from an attorney. And, when you've been in business long enough and you get a certified delivery of a letter from a lawyer, there is likely nothing good inside that envelope. This letter must have been 5 or 6 pages long, graphically detailing the course of events that led up to what was ultimately catastrophic damage to this house. And if memory serves me correctly, they were demanding something like $500,000 in repair costs. As it turns out, the renovations to the home never occurred, nor did the repair to this balcony. So during the ensuing summer months after closing, the exceptionally wet rainy season continued to penetrate this balcony. The water apparently was running along its structural members down below the decking, which eventually leached into the house itself, causing water to run down the first floor wall directly below it. The interior walls in this house happen to have a textured plaster finish. Unlike exposed drywall, moisture on the back side of this style of plaster finish can take some time to appear. That's because when it does appear, it is very likely that the drywall and substrate attaching the plaster to the wall have disintegrated. And that's what happened here. The entire wall coating collapsed, leaving a mess of exposed structural framing that was now growing mold and who knows whatever else. Frankly, we were shocked. Not only did we address this problem ad nauseum with all parties, but there was this big renovation that was supposed to happen, and all of these issues were supposed to have been addressed. Now, before I go any further, let me first say that the buyer's representative is no longer in this business. They had only worked in the field for a year or so prior to this transaction, and when this issue came to light, they left the industry shortly thereafter. Now, our first task following the receipt of this letter was to assemble the volumes of communication and disclosures that were kept all along the way. Our attorney then sent an equally lengthy letter outlining, essentially, what we have covered in this video up to this point. And then, radio silence. Absolutely no response. No more letters, nothing. Until one day, we were paid a friendly visit by our local process server, who delivered to us a complaint for failure to disclose, negligence, and a whole slew of causes of action under which the buyer, now owner, was suing us, as well as the former seller and the buyer's representative. Now, let me fast forward here and get to the punchline. Both our firm as well as the seller were reasonably quick to be dismissed from this action. We had to jockey in the normal course of things, but we suffered no damage other than the time and frustration in having to deal with this. Now, as I'm sure you've gathered up to this point, the buyer's representative never told the buyer about the balcony. They were happy with the price reduction and very happy at closing because they thought that reduction was to address the collection of minor issues. The buyer did have a casual conversation with their representative about renovations, but apparently there was no commitment to that process or any formal plans on addressing it. It was later discovered that the buyer's representative and members of their team discussed through text and email how they just needed this deal to close. and that the buyer has money and can fix these issues later. The problem here had nothing to do with the tenure this agent had in the industry. It had everything to do with a mindset of greed, of opportunism. The market was challenging at that point in time, and they were not only willing to do whatever it took to get paid, but were also, foolishly, willing to discuss and even conspire about how they would withhold important information expressly for the purpose of being paid. Because we are rarely able to speak directly with the principal on the other side of a transaction, on occasions, our agents will now, today, ask for confirmation in writing that sensitive information has been conveyed to the other side, so that we can maintain the level of transparency we must maintain throughout these transactions. You may ask, what does this have to do with the market today? Well, we're starting to see agent attrition in this industry, as transaction activity has contracted throughout 2022 and now into 2023. Those who are not previously well established are, for lack of a better term, clawing at what business remains available. Now, you may argue that this reaction is more fear-based than greed-based, but there is a clear distinction, and it is how we all started. The willingness to pursue with the intent to gain, knowingly putting others in potential harm. This also comes down to the idea of sacrifice. What are you willing to sacrifice to maintain your reputation and standing in your market? For established firms and practitioners, you will always sacrifice money to maintain your reputation. No amount of money nor involvement with any shady deal or player is worth compromising your position in the industry. And if you have to take it on the chin a bit due to the market doing what it does, so be it. Today, we're paying very close attention to any perception of cagey behavior. Though practitioners in our firm are always mindful of bad behavior, we're now in a place in the market where we're almost looking for it as best we can, so that neither ourselves nor our client base becomes subject to the potential nefarious intent of others, so that we do not become the victim to someone else's greed. If you would like for us to include any specific market information or topic of discussion, please let us know either in the comments, or if you are receiving the weekly mail emails, simply reply to that message and let us know. Remember, please like, share, and subscribe to either our social platforms or to the weekly mail email distribution list. With that, I hope to connect with you soon.